Shalom, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a live episode of Faith Walk, the intersection of life and faith. I am your host, Sharon Thomas, and my co-host, Sandra Lee, will be joining us very shortly. But right now, I'm just going to give the introduction. We have an expert guest here tonight. His name is Dr. Radolph Walters, and he has over 25 years of experience in the counseling and mental health field, as well as many other things. He's a clinical psychologist. He's a professor at Eastern University, and he has so many other accolades that I will get to shortly. But as we always do, please subscribe to the Facebook page if your channel, if you're watching via Facebook. If you're watching via YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Sorry about that. Facebook, like the page. And if you like what we're talking about this evening, like the video, because it helps the algorithm for us to get the videos onto more people's eyeballs so they can see it and like it and want to be a part of our growing nation here on Faith Walk. So let me just get to the comments real quickly, because we have a powerful conversation tonight and I don't want to delay. If you're watching, please say hello, because if you don't say hello, I won't know that you're watching, even though you are. But in order for me to shout you out, or if you have any questions for Dr. Walters, put the questions in the chat and I will put them on the screen and read the questions, and Dr. Walters will answer the questions. So please put your questions in the chat. If you want him to answer them, we'll get to your questions and he'll answer them. But first, he's going to do a little bit of talking so he can get some valuable information to you. But we're going to get to your questions. So hopefully you guys will engage with us and maybe share some of your experiences and everything that you would like to get out of this conversation tonight. Because the show is only an hour, but there's so much information that it's not enough for an hour. So, we're going to try to persuade Dr. Walters, hint, hint, to come back. He's been my guest on Race Matters several times. So he's a resident guest of on my platform. So we have here, let's see. Oh my gosh, they're streaming in already. And please, when you say hello in the chat, please put where you're streaming from, so we can know where everybody is from. So right now, Darlene Penn Wilson, good evening. Hi, Darlene. SC Turner. What's the YouTube page? Full Life Communications is the YouTube page. Full Life Communications, the same one that's on Facebook, it's on YouTube as well. And Honey Bunches, she's the first of the sisters to say, hey, Honey Bunches. Treasure Maxwell, good evening. SC Turner, hello. Lori Amato, good evening from Philly. Hey, Philly, I'm from Philly originally too. Hello, Akila's second sister to say to be on tonight. Akila has never been, I don't know, first or second, maybe. So Akila, now you're in the running. Love you, girl. Sandy Smith says hello. Hey, Sandy. Robin Wiley. Hey, Robin, miss you. Angela Williams. Hey, Angela. Hello. I'm excited to hear clinical wisdom. Yes, you are. I'm sure you will be. Akila, YouTube, Full Life Communications on YouTube. And hello from Lansdowne, that's Sandy Smith. Robin Woods, Full Life Communications. Hey, Robin, miss you. Robin's going to be on one of our other shows about Black women, the educated Black woman. Let's see, Treasure Maxwell from Camden, Robin Woods from Philly. Aisha, good evening, streaming from Atlantic City. Hey, Aisha, you're the third of your sisters. Aisha, come on now. You're bringing up the rear this week. Love you, Aisha. Camden Guru, SU Turner, New Jersey. Jennifer Wharton, good evening, everyone from Barbados. Hey, Barbados is in the house. Welcome, Barbados. Dr. Walters is from Barbados, so he's got his family and friends watching. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up my co-host so we can get to the heart of the matter. Sandra Lee is joining us right now. Hey, Sandra Lee, how are you, young lady?
I'm doing just fine. I'm excited for Dr. Walters, and so I can't wait. So I'm not going to say anything right now, just ready to bring him on.
Absolutely. So before I bring him on, I'm going to, again, like I said, read a brief bio. And actually the bio is brief, but I took some specific things out just to lessen the time that I talk so he can be on the show. So Dr. Walters is a clinical psychologist and a licensed professional counselor with over 25 years of experience. He specializes in trauma, anger management, and father-daughter bonds. He is the founder and director of Radolph Walters and Associates, LLC, which is a private counseling practice in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dr. Walters has a book that you can purchase that he's written. I don't know when he wrote it, but he can let you know that. And I'm going to put it up on the screen a little bit later. It's called Daddy's Girl, a psychological examination of the father-daughter bond. And he's currently in the process of writing a new book. And that book is called Daddycation. Bonding, Brokenness, and Building in the Father-Daughter Journey. That sounds wonderful. I cannot wait to read that book. And I'll also put Dr. Walters' contact information up later on in the show. But without further ado, here we
Yes.
are. And let's put a hand clap in the chat with the clapping of the hands emoji for our very own resident guest, Dr. Radolph Walters. How are you, Dr. Walters? Good to see you tonight.
Dr. Walters.
Well, it's so good to be back with you, Sharon. I was checking the date and realized that it was 2 years ago this month I was here with you, racial trauma and how to heal racial trauma. So it looks that I'm on every 2 years for you. So it's good to be here. And good, Sandra Lee. I want to first give a shout out to all my people on the beautiful island of Barbados. Thanks for your support, all my family and friends. And I believe there may be some folk who are joining as well from the UK. I have a whole following and family in the UK. It's about 1 a.m. in the morning, but I believe some of them are watching. And then a whole lot of people, former students, clients, past and present, and current students, and people who know me who are joining. So shout out to you. It's good to be with you. And I'm excited about this topic today.
Yes.
We are as well. And Dr. Walters, I haven't had a show on since 2022 because 2023 was quite a year for me. So I had to not do any of my shows in 2023. So you would have been on last year had I been on the air. So, so we're back, and so you're back. So what I would like to do, Robin Woods put up Full Life Communication. So anybody who wants to watch via YouTube or Facebook, that's the name of this platform where we're airing. Full Life Communications. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching via YouTube, or like the Facebook page if that's where you're watching, and like the video and share the video. Let's not keep this valuable information to ourselves. So Dr. Walters, can you just start off by sharing some information with us regarding the father-daughter bond that you think is, since we only have an hour, the most critical information that people need to know about the father-daughter bond?
Thank you so much. Well, we're talking about Black women and their fathers. Yes. And I think if we're going to have the conversation, it's important to put in context, because context, I say, is everything. That when we talk about the Black family, we need to look at the ways in which slavery and slave economy, we need to look at colonialism and racism, and the way in which they have shaped Black love, Black family, Black relationships, and affected the psyche of both Black men and women. So in that context, if we're going to talk about the relationship between fathers and daughters, it is critical to keep that in mind, and the centrality of what I call decolonization. Because if we're going to have the kind of relationships that are meaningful between fathers and daughters, if we're going to understand the role of fathers and the breakdown of family among those from the diaspora. So we're talking about those whose original home was Africa in the United States, whether it's Caribbean or South America, who originally came from Africa. Then we have to contextualize and understand how that whole process of colonialism and so on affected the family and affected the relationships and affected the way in which fathers come to relationships. So there are a couple of things I want to start off with if we put that in context. When I got involved in father-daughter research, and a large part of that is connected to my own journey growing up with 6 girls and having 2 daughters and doing ministry on the island of Barbados, and seeing there were so many women who struggled with what I call in my second book, daddy drum, father wounds. And so there was very little written on fathers and daughters. There's a lot more written now. And my study was over 20 years ago when I was finishing up my doctorate, my dissertation work on father-daughter attachment. And so if we go back to early development and the early literature on child development, that the focus, going back to Sigmund Freud and the early developmental psychologist, the focus really was on the mother-child relationship. The assumption was that a mother is essential to the health of the baby, and not a lot really talked about the role of fathers. And that was one of the things that got me particularly interested from an academic intellectual perspective on what is the relationship between a father and his daughters, his children. How does the father contribute to the development of the child? And so it is within that context that we have to understand what the early literature did, the early research, versus what we know now. And the role of the father is critical to the development of the child. And so when we look at research, even the research that I found is that fathers play an important role in the cognitive development of children, right? One of the issues, of course, is when we look, for example, at a lot of communities, if we think about Black communities, where there has been a degree of fatherlessness, and there are different reasons for that. If you look at the United States, we are certainly the country that leads in terms of incarceration, and large number of incarceration of Black men. And so there's a lot of fatherlessness and father absence. And so we've had a history of women who've had to leave single parent home. The research certainly shows that over 67% of children today are growing up in single parent families in the African American community. And so the presence of single mothers and the success of single mothers, my hat go out to single women who've raised children without fathers in the home and without fathers who are involved emotionally and making those connections. I think that there's a kind of assumption that fathers are not needed, and we're getting ready to celebrate Father's Day in a few days on Sunday. And so I think that the absence of research early and looking at the critical role of fathers to child development, I think the notion of the success of women in raising children and raising boys and raising girls contributed to what I would call an undervaluing of the role of fathers. So when we look at the research then, when we look at case studies, when we look at what is happening, fathers make a tremendous imprint on the cognitive, the emotional, so the thinking. So we can look at three areas that fathers make a significant imprint on the mind of the child, on the character of the child, and on the identity. And that is particularly true when we look at the impact of fathers on daughters. And so in this regard, we need to talk about father absence versus father presence, that we can have a father who's in the home, physically present, but emotionally unavailable. And that happens in many families. So you may have a father present in the home, but he's not emotionally connected to his daughter. And so there are many daughters who struggle with issues that I'll talk a little later about because fathers are not emotionally connected. On the other hand, you can have a father who's not in the home, but he's emotionally involved and connected. So the critical issue for fathers and daughters and their relationship has to do with the emotional connection, what we call attachment. Attachment is a strong emotional bond, the connection we have, the quality. The research shows, my own research, that what we call the effective quality of the relationship between the father and the daughter is what is critical. When we look at the last few generations, it is true that the absence of fathers in the family has been the greatest challenge in the last few generations. Let me say that again. The absence of fathers in the home or father involvement and connection has been the greatest tragedy in our communities. And so the cost of father absence is critical. It makes an imprint, a significant imprint. And I'm talking today specifically about daughters. What we know then is that fathers make a deep rooted and permanent imprint on the life, the character, the identity of the daughter. And daughters who have very poor attachment to their fathers will struggle in a number of areas. We also know that the attachment, a daughter's attachment to her father, is just as important as the mother attachment. As a matter of fact, there is a study, a longitudinal study. A longitudinal study are studies where we follow people over a period of years. And there's a professor at Yale University. His name is Carl Pruitt, that has done a lot of research in this area, has an excellent book called Father Need, Why Father Care is as Essential as Mother Care for Your Child. And that body of research coming out of the Yale Study Center really shows that connection and attachment to fathers is just as important, and that actually the children who are in families and homes where the father is the primary caretaker, and that those children, their outcomes, their developmental outcomes, when we look at a number of variables, whether it's emotional connection, whether it's cognitive development, that is just as strong as if it is the mother. And so we know then that while early research has focused very little on, if any, on the role of father in the development of the daughter, that subsequent work shows that fathers make a tremendous impact. And I must say as well, not only in my own experience as a father of daughters, not only in my own experience as a brother of 6 girls growing up, but in much of my clinical work, I see this. And I've developed a real instinct, a sixth sense, if you like, that when I'm sitting with a client, when I'm sitting with a female client, I can tell when she has father issues, when there's daddy drome, as I call it. And so fathers made an impact on the identity, the self, the personality development, the psychological adjustment of children, and particularly in this regard, on daughters. And so that's the way that God designed it. God's original divine intention is that children are raised in the context of home and family, and that fathers are present. We know it's not a perfect world. Our world is very broken and we're imperfect people. But God's design suggests to us, the social science research shows and proves that the father's presence in the home, that his connection with his daughter is significant. And there are greater outcomes for the daughter, that she is healthier on a number of different dimensions when she has a strong bond or attachment in terms of relationships, in terms of how she sees herself and her work in the world. So as we talk about, what are the challenges for when fathers are present or absent? And so a father who is not emotionally available, whether he's in the home or not in the home, if he's not emotionally available, then there are issues, of course, with support. Then we have to think, when we think about Black family, about the role of what we call intergenerational trauma or historical trauma. We cannot talk about Black family. We cannot talk about the role of father in the context of his connection with his daughters without understanding the way in which Black family, the way in which men have been ravaged as a result of a slave society and economy, that the impact of racism, the impact of colonialism, and what that has done to the psyche. And I don't have time to go into some of the ways in which slave society destroyed Black family. We have to acknowledge that. The way in which slaves, when they came to America, when they came to the Caribbean, when they came to South America, were separated. They were no longer family. That planter A might take a father and he goes to one plantation in Louisiana, And plan to B might take the children and they go to a plantation in Mississippi, and plan to C might take mom and she goes to a plantation in South Carolina. And so the very fabric and nature of slavery and a slave economy and society destroyed Black family. And we also know, when we look at instances where our women were taken from us and were raped or were sexually abused, they were impregnated. And we have to consider the way in which what that did not only to Black men, but to Black women. And so what I'm saying is that we can't talk about a conversation about the impact of fathers on daughters without understanding the impact of men, on historical trauma, on Black men. And we have to also think about the way in which a daughter's memories of her father are significant, whether he's present or not. We know from the research that what she remembers about her father, that those father memories help to shape how she comes to relationships. And in the context of Black family, we have to think as well ways in which the dealing with her own daddy drone affects the way in which she interacts in her own relationship with men. And so those are critical things. So we need to, if we're going to talk about the development of Black family, if we're going to talk about the ways in which we help to empower women, we need to think about what I call decolonization. And decolonization is essentially de-traumatization. We have to talk about how we help to de-traumatize Black men, how we help to de-traumatize Black women, and the way in which I think that interacts and affects the quality of the relationships. So it's one thing to just dog on men, dog on fathers, and to say that, men are deadbeat. Many of our fathers are deadbeat fathers, but we have to understand context. And that's something I can revisit later. We also know that girls learn how to play with their peers by playing with their fathers, what we call rough and tumble play. Many fathers do that. I remember, for example, when my daughter was a little girl, she was excited when I came home and wanted to play, and I would throw her in the air and we would wrestle, and she enjoyed that. And we know that rough and tumble play does help girls to be able to have a sense of how they interact and help them with a sense of autonomy, which I want to talk about, because autonomy is critical. That one of the things that fathers give to daughters that is not so with mothers is a sense of autonomy. Now, what do we mean by autonomy? Autonomy is a word that has some reference to a social or relational context. So we don't talk about autonomy outside of the social milieu, all right? Because autonomy means that there's a kind of self-governing, there's what we might call a sense of agency, which is one's ability to be able to make decisions, right? That girls who have strong attachment to their fathers tend to be very strong in terms of autonomy. And so in autonomy, there are two types of autonomy I want to talk about. There's what we call more relational autonomy, where an individual is defined through the relationship with others. And I think traditionally women tend to really operate a lot from relational autonomy, because we often see women through their roles: mother, wife, and so on. But then there is what we call personal autonomy. And what we know is that daughters who have strong attachment to their fathers, demonstrate this ability to make their own decisions, what we call personal autonomy, that they're stronger in their ability to be self-governing, their ability to make choices, their sense of agency in the world. They're not timid. They're not as laid back in terms of being able to make choices about their relationships and what they need in relationships. One of the things I found in my own research is that daughters who had strong attachment, strong bonds and connection with their fathers, had higher expectations of relationships. And so I remember many years ago, this is probably 2006 or 2008, after I finished my dissertation research, I presented it at a conference in Texas. And there was this man that came up to me, he was really excited and just waiting to talk to me. And he asked me, well, you know, he told me about his daughter and her age, and that he was very concerned that she was not in a relationship and was wondering if she would ever be in a relationship, and describe a scenario in which, you know, she was picky. And I had to tell him, well, that is an excellent illustration of what I just presented. Because of who you are to her and your strong connection to her, that when she looks at relationship, you're the model. And that's one of the things that we see clearly. The daughters who have strong attachment to their fathers have higher standards and higher expectations of relationships. And generally speaking, in their psyche, they're comparing every man to daddy. And so that is very critical, that a very secure, loving relationship with a father helps a girl. A girl comes to understand herself. And we're talking going back to 0 to 3 years old in that period. And as she developed what we call gender identity, this sense that I'm a girl, that her sense of femininity she gets from her father. He is the first man in her life. And so that's critical to her development. And so think about ways in which, when that's absent, what that must do. There is some research that also shows that daughters who have strong and positive attachment to their fathers tend to wait longer to have their first sexual intercourse experience. Very, very, very interesting finding. And so a daughter's relationship to her father shapes what she expects in relationships. The quality of her relationship is connected to the quality of her romantic relationships, and how she comes to those relationships is shaped in some way by her connection with her father. And so those emotional connection, that bonding is critical. I want to talk about affirmation. This is an area that's huge. Affirmation from a father is critical to his daughter. And so one of the things you could do if you're listening to your dad is make sure that you affirm your daughter. The daughters who struggle with self-esteem, that part of that, I'm not saying the only reason why a daughter might struggle with self-esteem, but what we know clearly is that when she has a father who is very affirming, that she tends to have higher self-esteem, that she tends to have more positive sense in terms of sexual experience, that she has less fear in intimate relationships, that relationships are safer for her because of the connection she has with her daddy. So we now know that fathers are critical to the development of their daughters, that her relationship with her father helps to shape her later relationship. And what I found is that daughters who had a favorable connection with their father tend to have more affirmative view. In other words, that she sees relationship more positively when her connection with her father is strong, and they see relationships as less fearful and less negative. That the more support she gets from her father, the more positive her expectation of others. So if her father is very affirming and supportive, then it helps her to feel safe in what she expects in other relationships. and her ability to make choices and decisions, her sense of independence, she gets out of that connection with her father, and that's critical. And so the memory a daughter has, and some of you listening, your father may not be here, but your father memories and your expectations affect the quality of your performance in marriage. The research also shows that a smile may take a moment, but the memory of that smile lasts forever. The memory of the smile of your dad. It doesn't matter who your father was. It matters who you remember him to be. Who is he in your mind? And then we get into legacy. Legacy is what we leave behind. What is the? I'm doing legacy right now. What is it that is imprinting on my daughters? What will I leave when I'm no longer here? And that is what is critical. How does she think about and remember her father? She carries that inside of her. So those memories are critical, her recollection of his words, of his actions. Those memories that she has of her father shape how she sees herself, her view of self, how she sees others, how she sees the world, life, and how she sees God, which is another issue. The daughters who have fathers who weren't available or who were abusive, who were absent, they struggle with the notion of God as father. Because imprinted in their mind, these what we call neural pathways, she come to believe that fathers are abandoning, that fathers are not available. And what we tend to do, all of us, is that we project onto God our inner objects. That whatever we believe about ourselves, whatever we believe particularly about others, and in this instance, whatever we believe about fathers or our father, we project onto God. So those daughters may struggle with the notion of God as father. When in my mind, there's a kind of imprint, is a trauma memory, really. It's a trauma narrative that associated with father is the notion of abandonment, ejection, absence, harshness, that sometimes we experience God as harsh, that a girl might experience God as harsh, as unavailable, because daddy was harsh. Daddy was unavailable. And think about the relationship of that to her faith journey. As I sort of wind down on impact, so what we see then with girls, daughters who have fathers who are unavailable, who are absent, who are abusive, who are silent, who are missing in action, who suffer from daddy drum, struggle with anger, with frustration, with fear, makes sense, right? Trust of others, because our first relationship formed the template for all later relationships. Let me say that again. Remember that the father is the first man in a girl's life, that forms a psychological template for all other relationships. And she is comparing other men, and a lot of this is unconscious, to the image, the imprint in her mind. We call those schemas. And we don't change those easy. They're neural pathways. They're trauma narratives that require some work. She'll struggle with abandonment issues. That, a man is not going to be available. She lacks one of the areas that fathers make a critical impact on daughters is identity. She struggles with a lack of clear identity. She might struggle with loneliness. You see women who are lonely or not. Perhaps some that goes back to the relationship with a father, with sadness, with doubt, with alienation, and something we call alexithymia, which is difficulty experiencing the emotions. Yes, that can happen to girls. We think women are emotional, but she can struggle in that area. And with what we call attachment battles. An attachment battle is a desire to connect, but a fear of connecting. So we see that. And we see it play out very much in relationships with men. I want a partner, I want to connect, but I'm afraid of connecting. Because somewhere in my mind, I have a sense that, you know, will he be really there for me? It shapes her expectation. Remember that love is spelled T-I-M-E. So R minus R equal to W. Role minus relationship equal to wounded. So we have a role, a father role, but no relationship, no connection, no affective bond, no emotional connection. It's going to lead to psychic wounding. All right. And that affects the daughter, her sense of self. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm worth. I don't know if I'm loved. I don't know if I'm pretty. I don't know where I belong. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how I feel or how I think. That's identity. That her sense of herself, her sense of identity is shit by Daddy Drum. And then her confidence. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can keep him. It's my fault. Her abandonment fear. I don't know if I can trust. We see this critical. I don't know if he will stay. Actually, I don't know if he cares. Those are schemas, core beliefs as a result of the failure and of attachment, of deep connection with our father. And so, so to conclude then, it's critical that fathers connect with daughters. And there's so many women who struggle in relationships, struggle even in their faith walk, because they have had relationships that were far from what is optimum. There's optimum. That God has a blueprint, but we live in a very broken world. And actually, sometimes she never knew her father. Every little girl wants a daddy. And so we see girls, women with what I call a father void, a yearning for father. Father, there's a yearning. I've seen that over and over and over again. With adult women, there's a yearning for daddy. The absence of father. And I believe that God has created us so. And so it's important, if you're a father, to do all you can to make yourself available and to work at connecting deeply with your daughters, because you're the bomb in her mind. You're the bomb. That you make a tremendous imprint on your daughter's life. And so I'm going to stop there, Sharon, and maybe we can take some questions or
Absolutely, Dr. Walters. And in the chat, everyone is, agreeing with you from their experiences with, or probably without their fathers, and how what you've said they would agree with. I know my dad was in my life for the whole time before he passed away, and those traits that you just spoke of with that attachment, that's me, right? And you know me, right? And so I attest to that as well. So I'm going to share some questions, and then what I'm going to do is just going to let you have the stage. So when I put a question up, this way I don't have to come back on and ruin your flow. When I put a question up, you can just read the question there and then answer it. Is that okay?
Sure.
But I'll start off with the first question, which is from, now if I mispronounce your name, please excuse me, Nibor L. What about strong negative attachments? What does that look like? So the rest of the questions I'll just put up on the screen for you to answer when you're done, okay? And I'm going to drop it.
Now, I'm assuming that strong negative attachments, so we have a kind of oxymoron here. So strong attachment, and the attachment is negative. What I was talking about is strong attachment, because strong attachments are positive. All right, that there's this attachment that is important and necessary for optimum development of the daughter. And so my assumption, Nibor, is that you probably mean where there's an attachment, but it's maybe the relationship is abusive, or maybe it's negative. Maybe dad is harsh or whatever. And if that's what you mean, and that's the case, then we're talking about, if we think in terms of the imprint that a father makes, we're talking about daughters who are crushed, right? Who are timid, who lacks confidence. I talked earlier about autonomy, the sense of autonomy, the ability to, the sense of agency and ability to move in the world with confidence, their sense of being self-possessed. Self-possessed is the notion of being confident, and being able to manage one's emotions, being able to control oneself, and be calm, self-possession. That we're going to have issues in that area. So again, I'm making an assumption about what you mean by strong negative, because we can have a relationship. I mean, we all have relationships with fathers. The issue is, what is the quality of that relationship? Even in father absence, there's relationship, but what is the nature of that relationship? And father absence is critical. And fathers can make the greatest imprint when they're absent, even as when they're present. Tremendous impact. So what happens to girls who are raised without a father, in the absence of a father figure, from birth to 5 years of age? Good question. I would posit, Kachana, that those girls will struggle with avoid. Sometimes people say, well, how do you need or know what to need if you never had it? And that's a good question. That's reasonable. You don't know what it is because you never had it. What I'm asserting is that there is a void, there's an absence. I believe that there's a way in which that God has created us with this ability, this need for these two individuals that we call mom and dad, right? And so where the father is absent, and what I see from my own experience, Clinton, is that those women struggle, those girls, with a void, and are often not aware of what they need. Sometimes we can know we can need something, but not be aware that we need it. But we will see it play out a little later, particularly when they begin to form and develop interest in intimate relationships. We see it. And again, oftentimes they're father figures. One of the things we know from trauma research is that in before age 18, the research shows that one positive relationship in a child's life acts as a buffer. And so she may not have had a father present before age 5, but then later there's Uncle Joe, or there's their grandparents, the other positive figures. And we've had in Black communities that for years, the impact and influence of multi-generational families, where their grandparents and their other male figures and models. And she will yearn for that. Often what we see is girls like this often are attracted to older men without having a clue why. by the time they're ready and they begin to have, opposite sex attractions, they're attracted to older men and they don't know why. It's just a thing. Well, they've yearned for this connection. It's a void. What if the spiritual concept called renewing of mind? How are we as leaders and lovers of God's people to help others overcome these core psychological injuries? That's a good question. And so I have a bias. I'll confess. I'm a clinical psychologist. So I believe in therapy, and I believe everyone can benefit from therapy at some point in their lives. And so I would say, in response to your question, David, that being able to find someone who can walk you through some of those difficult places. Now, the Word of God has the potential to change. As a matter of fact, those schemas, which are resistant to change, right? That we can use. There are a lot of stuff in Scripture, right, that can help us. Yes, we are changed. The Word said, "Be not conformed," Romans 12, but be changed by the renewing of your mind. I would argue, one, that the concept of the renewing of your mind in Romans 12:1 is cognitive therapy 101, right? That we can change the way we think. But if we put therapy over here, that we use the Word, there's so much in the Word that is affirming. There's so much in the Word of God that can help us to address who we are, that can help us to address issues of identity and learning how to replace what we did not have with something else, and learning to think of ourselves, daughters, that is, and their sense of identity in Christ, right? But that's a process. It doesn't just happen, simply by quoting the Scripture. It's using the Word and believing the Word. It's a process, which is pretty similar to what we might do in therapy and what we call cognitive reframing. How do you heal from a void of your father? That's a good question. I would say the first thing you need to do is to confront the truth, right? You need to be willing to acknowledge and confront the truth. And the truth about the void that you yearn, and be able to identify, I would say, secondly, your losses. So an important question is, what is it that I wanted most from my father that I didn't get? What is it I wanted most? That's a deep question. Rather than respond, as sometimes people respond defensively, right? Well, he wasn't there. I don't care. I don't need him. I turn out right. My mom took care of me, and he wasn't there, so I didn't need him. Well, that's a little defensive. When I need, and the object doesn't give. What I do, what we call a re-representation, I say to myself, I don't need. So we see women sometimes who tell themselves that they don't need. That's a defensive, because when I need something and I can't have it and I don't get it, it creates, especially if it could be available, it creates in my mind what we call a cognitive dissonance. And so everything that is difficult for us psychically and psychologically, one of the ways we try to make sense of it is a process we call rationalization, where we tell ourselves something to make it palatable so we can live with it. We tell ourselves that we're okay. We tell ourselves that we're fine, that daddy wasn't here, or we never knew him. All right. And so we have to acknowledge, and that's why I said identifying the losses. So what is it that I wanted most from him that I didn't get? That's the beginning of the healing process. You cannot conquer what you do not confront. You cannot confront what you do not acknowledge, and you cannot acknowledge what you do not see. So you have to acknowledge it. I want to go on to this next questions from Miss Love. What the mother prevent the father from having a relationship with his daughter? I guess, Miss Love, you mean what happens in that case? You know, let me respond this way. Oftentimes, women or mothers are not aware, and I hope that this session tonight can be helpful, of how important it is for a daughter to have a relationship with her father. Now, if, of course, and mothers are generally very protective, if the father is abusive, you want to protect that daughter, all right? But as a mother, it's important to support your daughter in helping her with that connection, and also holding the father accountable, the degree to which you're able to do that, because there are a lot of different scenarios here, age of the child or whatever, right? So I get the protection. But sometimes in relationships, and when we have breakups, they can be painful, and adults can act, like fools, and make bad choices and use children as pawns and as revenge. There's something we call parental alienation syndrome. And when that happens, it is not good. It's not healthy, because girls need their fathers, and be able to separate that from your own relationship with him. And so doing whatever is necessary to be supportive of that relationship. And I'm assuming, of course, unless it's very abusive or detrimental to the daughter. Annalie Blackson, thanks for your question. How do people heal when they don't even know who their fathers are? Oh, thank you so much for that question. And so if you don't know who your father is, and there is a show, I forgot what's called now, where people with the technology, there are people who as adults, because we still have this yearning. It's very interesting that children who are raised in foster homes, and oftentimes really good foster parents, excellent foster parents, they reach a point in their adult life where they want to know who their daddy is. Like, it's so ingrained in us. I think it's biology. And they have worked to, in some cases, people have found their fathers. Now, that doesn't happen always. And sometimes people don't have the resources, or they're not told what can be done. Maybe their dad is not here any longer. So if that's the case, acknowledge, as I said, there's a real father wound. There's a father void. So thinking about what can I do to replace that void, and God has provided in our families, in Christian communities, if we're talking about younger girls and women, men who can be father figures, because the notion of fathers and fathering, it's not one that is exclusive simply to biology. I would say that I know in my own life, I father people who are not my biological daughters or sons, because I am a father, and God has anointed me for fathering, to father generations. And so the notion of fathering is not just tied to biology, and there are ways in which finding safe men, emphasis on safe, to be surrogates, and we've operated with surrogates, can be helpful to those women who have those voids and never knew a father. How does having an absent father affect the Black woman in her marital relationship? So I talked earlier, I think I covered a lot of this material when I talk about the impact on the daughter. The absent father, that the daughter is going to struggle with her sense of self. Am I enough? Am I good enough? Her sense of identity, her confidence, in relationships. She may respond to her partner in a very competitive way. She may respond to her partner in a way that is the opposite of autonomy. That she doesn't take charge. She's not assertive. She struggles in relationships with not only knowing what she wants, but asking for what she wants. And that's what assertiveness is. The ability to say what you think and how you feel and ask for what you want. So one of the things that will happen in that marriage is that she may be in a marriage where she doesn't, it's like she's lost her voice, or she doesn't. I argue that the voice is always there. We just need to tap into it, right? And so she's in a relationship where she doesn't ask for what she wants. And I think that's critical in any marriage. You got to say what you want. And she undervalues herself. And those are some of the things that you see in addition to what I shared earlier.
Well, Dr. Walters, we are winding down, unfortunately. It is 3 minutes till 9. And obviously, there's so much more that you can share. But I do want to be mindful of your time and the time of the audience, as well as my co-host. So we're going to wrap it up. But I thank you so much for the gems, the valuable gems that you shared and the answers to the audience questions. Could you please say a little bit about, before we go, your book that's going across the lower third now, Daddy's Girl, a psychological examination of the father-daughter bond, how, whatever you would like to say about that, how people can purchase that book. And I'm also going to put on the lower third the new book that you're currently writing that will be available at some point soon. So I would like for you just to say a few words about that as well.
Daddy's Girl, a psychological examination of the father-daughter bond. It's essentially my dissertation research that I publish in a book form, and that can be had on Amazon. If you put in the title or my name, you'll find it there. So that's just hard research and my study. The book that I have been working on for several years, it's called Daddycation, a term I developed, bonding, brokenness, and building in the father-daughter journey. So the book is divided into 3 sections. So the first section, bonding, essentially I'll describe each of these. So the first part of the book, bonding, looks at the imprint of fathers on daughters. So pretty much, a lot of what I talk about tonight, the psychological imprint and impact, the role of fathers in child development, the role of fathers on daughters. And the second part of the book, brokenness, looks at what happens when that goes awry, when there is broken attachment, absent father, abusive fathers, invisible fathers, all kinds of relationship. When that connection, that bond doesn't go right, when things go right, when there is trauma, relational trauma, what that looks like. So I talk a lot of what I was just talking about, identifying the schemas, identifying what it does to a daughter. And the book is, there's a lot of narratives. So I share a lot of stories from women who have completed questionnaires for me in this project. And some of them are clients or former clients who gave me permission to share their story. Of course, they're pseudonyms, women I know, And so I tell a lot of stories about women to illustrate, because stories are critical. Our lives are a collection of stories to illustrate the impact. as women talk about their own relationship with fathers. So that's brokenness. And then the third part that I would say, I love the whole book, but the third part I'm most excited about, because I'm a healer and I want to take this on the road, is how do you help women to heal? So it looks at, and some of the stuff I talk about tonight, it looks at how can women repair. It's really about repairing the breach where there's relational trauma, where there's broken relationships. How can women heal? Because I'm interested in healing. The story is good and the theory is good, but how do we help you to heal? And I talk about that in the last part, what I call building. And so that's the book essentially. Just keep me in prayer. I need to get back to my writing. The pandemic kind of took things off course. And my life is complex and very busy. And if you're a writer, you know, you have to find time to write. And sometimes that can be challenging, but I need to get it done. It's about 3/4 finished. I need to get that done, and it needs to get out. So keep me in prayer and even keep me accountable. When am I going to get the book is a perfectly fine question.
So I know a way to do that, Dr. Walters. Our audience can help keep you accountable as well as myself, Sandra Lee, by having you on as a guest continually and asking you, when will the book be done? When will the book be done? Because we're eagerly awaiting it. And
I don't have any problems with that, because I know the power of accountability, and I'm fine with accountability.
Yes. And we've had several people in the chat saying we need a part 2, a part 10. So we definitely want to have you back. I know your schedule is so busy, but
you also know that I make time for you, Sharon. And
I do know you do that, Dr. Walters, and I appreciate you for it.
And this is, this is part of my life's work. This is, I believe God has called me as a healer in the world. I am clear about my purpose. And so for me, this is my work and legacy. And I love talking about this stuff and for people to find hope and healing, and like, this is fun. So it's not onerous or anything to come and share and talk. These are issues that are important for all of us.
Yes, absolutely.
So heal. So,
and we need it so much because we struggle, in every aspect of our lives and our relationships when we struggle with a broken attachment with our fathers, just as you explained. But the thing is, what the issue is, as I'm a therapist as well, as you know, people don't know this information, right? You go to therapy to find this information out. But if you don't go to therapy, how do you find this information out? And everybody's not reading a book to find out. And so we're often acting out in ways, trauma responses, based on a history that we don't even understand how it's currently impacting us in our current relationship. Because it always is. It can't not happen. Because this is the psychological process of everyone. It's just not, what happens to some people. This is what happens to all of us when certain things happen. Our experiences may be different, but this is what happens. And that's why it's so important to get into therapy, so you can understand your own self and now understand how you're relating to your child and your parenting, because your daddy issues show up in your parenting as well, shows up in your relationships, shows up in your friendships. It's not like it just shows up one place. Our issues show up everywhere because we take all of us with us in every situation, in every decision that we make, and everything that we do. And so if we don't know ourselves, we're doing ourselves and the others who we come in contact with and have relationship with a disservice, because we're not giving them the best of us. We're giving them the rest of us. That's another phrase that I'm going to trademark. I have so many things that I'm going to trademark. Please don't take it. Not you, Dr. Walters, just anybody. I probably should keep some of these things to myself. But so it's just, the information is just so valuable, so important. So you and I, Dr. Walters, will be behind the scenes talking about when you can come back on again, and maybe if we can do a special series, because someone asked about that in the chat, about maybe doing a series. So we will be behind the scenes talking about that. Let me just get these last couple of, okay, what did I do here? I'm challenged here in this area. Want to make sure I get to everybody's final comments. And Dr. Walters' contact information is going across the lower third of the screen. So please take down his contact information. And Shakina says, thank you for sharing with us your knowledge. And Tina Tarpon McNeil, my time has been well spent and life-changing. Thank you so much. And the last comment is from Kashana Thomas. Agree, therapy saved my life. It is the best investment I could have made. Thank you for sharing that, Kashana, because I think everybody needs to know that. We need to break the stigma of the fear, of the unknown of therapy and what that relationship with the therapist looks like. Long is gone is the day that therapists are only white. We have therapists of all nationalities, all ethnicities. And so therefore, if you don't want someone of a specific ethnicity, you can find someone of your own, because that's where we are now. And I'm not trying to say that white therapists aren't good therapists. I'm not saying that, but we know because of our history in America, we have some issues with sharing certain information with white folks. Let's just be honest. Okay. So those of us who do, now we have a plethora of people who you can go to for therapy. So let's get out of the fear mode. And what might happen? You know what might happen? Your healing might happen. And how great would that be to be a healed Black woman, right? Despite whether your father was present or absent, you can heal from that wound. But you have to submit yourself to the healing. And that's work and effort that takes place. But it's a great work, because on the other side of that, you will know who you really are and who God really created you to be, the essence of you. So I'm going to stop there because I know we're already over our time. It's 9:07. Thank you again, Dr. Walters, for joining us tonight. I so appreciate you and your time and all your knowledge. Thank you, audience, for being so engaging with all of your questions and comments. We really appreciate you. And I look forward to our next time together, whenever that might be. And Sandra and I will be here next Wednesday, and it will be Juneteenth. So we're going to celebrate Black folks on Juneteenth, right? Celebrate the Black family, the Black woman, the Black man, the Black community. We're going to celebrate Black people next Wednesday, which is Juneteenth, which is June the 19th. So join us next Wednesday and every Wednesday. And we're in the Black Woman series. Okay, so we're going to continue that through the month of July. I think we have different topics. The Angry Black Woman, is fact or fiction, the independent Black woman, the educated Black woman, the single Black mother, and the single woman. Those are our next, not in that order, but those are our next episodes regarding the Black woman. Then we're going to do the Black man series. So we have a lot of things in store so we can help the Black community get to where we know we want to be and where we say we want to be, but there's a way to get there. And oftentimes we just don't know. So this platform, we're bringing on people and having Sandra Lee and myself share with you, this is how to get there. We no longer have to be stuck. We have knowledge, we have information, and the number one thing we have is Jesus Christ on our side. And all things are possible with Jesus. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Dr. Walters. You all have a God evening, have a God week, and we will see you next Wednesday live at 8 p.m. on Faith Walk, the intersection of life and faith. God bless you. Shalom.